Thank you very much. Sorry that you've got a bad voice. I know what it's like to talk with a bad voice on the radio. We have, I don't know, 100 questions we prepared. We whittled them down. I would like to start. You talk about restoring trust in communities. You talk about local councillors. You talk about how local councillors that work for the ANC, that belong to the ANC, must live in their communities. And you've said that as the ANC for quite a long time now, I would say probably 6 or 7 years. And yet, we know that that doesn't happen now. We know from what we could see in Vumani and Mamomalele, in places like that, in Vuwani, we can see that this doesn't happen. We can see from service delivery protests that happen time and time again, often in the same place, that ANC councillors seem completely removed from their communities. At the same time, the list of people that you have put forward as candidates for these elections, 60% of your councillors you wish to retain. Why would we expect a different result if we try with the same people?
I think it's, we're trying to balance issues. Retention is about avoiding a whole-scale removal of experienced councillors so that you retain some skills. You need renewal so that there's fresh energy that comes in. But I think it's also important to say that we have to emphasize the issue of councillors living in their own areas. It is not like all councillors have left their areas. It's just that we have to keep emphasizing it so that we discourage those who get tempted to move into suburbs and make sure that people understand that that's the expectation from the communities. There are different reasons for protests. You talk about Vuwani, that is an issue of a demarcation board. And if you know, you remember Matatiele, you remember Bushbuck Ridge, you remember Merafong, all these areas, people react quite negatively sometimes to demarcation, and it's not something you can do anything about because demarcation board takes its own independent decisions and has got its own processes. So you have to only come in afterwards to deal with the fallout, and so that's what happened there. In other areas, we're dealing with different situations. I think the large number of protests, we need to understand there's a lot of poverty, the economy is not doing well, so you will find that level of dissatisfaction goes up as a result of that.
But Dr. Mkhize, with all the places that you cited, I think the common thread there, although there are all various reasons for the protest, the common thread is people seem to think that the ANC is not listening, that they have to burn things down to get attention. That's really worrying.
No, in all the areas of demarcation, it's not the ANC that is responsible. But what happens is that when the decisions have been taken, there has to be a ruling one way or another. With demarcations, people will be unhappy if you go one side, but if you can't please everyone at the same time. So that's the kind of thing that you'll get. Those who are unhappy will say that you didn't listen to us.
Okay, so that's the issue with demarcation. If you think about service delivery protests, many of the protests around the country are about the performance of councillors and the fact that councillors don't listen.
Now, there are those instances where they've got a problem because the councillors don't respond. In some instances, there's a lot of internal contestation. That's why you would sometimes see that the people are protesting against an ANC councillor wearing ANC t-shirts. Sometimes even the contestation of position inside does create a targeting of the sitting councillors. So it's quite a combination of issues. But we have to say that where people are concerned about lack of communication and that there's no response, in the one instance where you're finding the councillors being responsible, we have to act on those. There are instances where it's just the constraints on the available resources where people cannot get what they need simply because the budget can't afford that.
But it seems like the ANC has no early warning system that this is going to happen. It seems like the first that Luthuli House hears about these protests are when they listen to a traffic bulletin on the radio in the morning. It seems like there's no mechanism that tells you that you know that this is about to happen or that people are angry. And we see evidence of it all the time. I mean, I think the question we're both trying to get to is that we don't see any evidence that the current situation is going to improve because the mechanism, what you're trying to put in place, has been tried before and seems to have failed.
The issue of early warning mechanisms does belong to the area of governance. You have to have the issue of the municipalities that as an administration have to deal with issues. You have to deal with the issue of the police, who also have to deal with issues where there are issues of unrest. So Luthuli House does not play a direct role in management of those issues. Where I agree with you is that you do need a lot more early warning signals to be able to intervene. But I think it's an important issue that it's a thing that we need to do to empower municipalities, even at provincial and local government levels.
Okay, so in this local government election, there has been a lot of turbulence in the country. There's been a lot of protest action. There's a lot of turbulence within the ANC. There's been battles over election lists. Why is it coming to the stage where people are killing each other to become a councillor?
That, for me, is a criminal issue. So we have to just act on it on the basis that it doesn't matter how much contest there is, it doesn't matter how much people dislike each other. Once there is crime involved, it has to be taken as issue of criminal action that needs police to get involved. And in the context of all of that, we are dealing with the grievances that are coming from our selection processes. It's always expected that there will be some aggrieved party, so there's a process that we use to be able to deal with those. We've addressed a lot of them. There are still some that are still outstanding.
Okay, but the contestation, the reason people seem to be killing each other is not because they want to carry out the mandate of the ANC. It's because they want access to power and resources. That surely is not the kind of cadres, in your speak, that the ANC wants in its ranks. It's not the kind of people that you want serving the people of South Africa.
Where we've got proof that people have killed each other because of that, we've got no choice. We have to be able to act and deal with those. And specifically, you see, the recent cases that we're talking about, we're still going through police investigations. So that's when you will be able to know what is happening. But even in areas where the ANC has found that there are problems, the ANC has to act on those.
Do you think people in the ANC trust the police? Benegent Lemez is an honest man. I'm sorry, you opened the door. I mean, they're the ones who have to investigate this. It comes down to trust in the police.
Now, let me just say that I think police must be left to do their work. And that's all I can say. The issue of comments that have been raised, we've seen the comments that would have come from, I think recently it was a Communist Party. We don't have details of those, but we believe that if they've got concerns, they need to be taken up with the relevant departments, because if you've got concerns about the police, you must actually act and take them through the police investigation services.
But Dr. Mkhize, it's not, you don't act at the stage where somebody has already died. You act at the stage where there is so much tension and contestation in your structures. That's where you step in, surely,
Yes.
because that tensions then affect or impact on the ability to deliver eventually when those people are elected into councils.
No, that is correct. But you see, you are dealing with actions that you find in different parts of the country. So you will act on the one area. If something crops up, it crops up in a different area. It's not the lack of action of the ANC on that. It's just that if they are happening in different parts, then if we didn't know it was going to be happening, it becomes difficult to preempt it. But we still have to pursue it and act on it on the basis of we cannot accept criminality as part of a normal democratic contestation.
So in this election, you are in an election campaign, but you're also battling negative perceptions about the leadership of the ANC, more than usual. You've had several scandals hanging over the ANC. It must worry you that, you know, when you are trying to put out positive messages, this good story to tell that you are trying to tell us, you're always competing with yourselves, because there are always negative things happening in the ANC. I'll give you an example right here today. While we're talking to you about the ANC manifesto, what the issue, or the event that's competing with us is the spy tapes case in the High Court. So it splits people's attention. Surely the ANC should be able to manage these negative perceptions or get rid of whatever it is that's causing this negativity around the ANC?
Well, in a way, it is easy to say so. However, if you have got a party involved in administration, there are going to be all sorts of mistakes that will happen. There are all sorts of issues that will arise that will always be competing with whatever program that we are trying to implement. And so all we have to do is to manage whatever has come at that point and prevent as much of what you don't want to see happening. But on a situation like this, these are political issues that have dragged on for a long time and that you can't change, as it were.
But
These
you
are-
can change it.
Sorry?
You can change it. You're the ANC. You can change it.
Well, how do you change it? Because the issue here, you are talking about the spy tapes, it's an issue that's come back quite a long way, and it's playing itself out in courts there, so there isn't a way you're going to stop court processes.
But you have to admit, Dr. Mkhize, I mean, in case your recall is failing, that there's a certain consistency. I mean, it's not just the spy tapes that goes back 8-9 years. Which the ANC knew, by the way, when it first took the decision at Polokwane. I mean, that was that was very well known what happened in the Sheikh trial. It's also in Kandla. The knowledge we have now around the Gupta family is public knowledge. I mean, there's a certain trend. Surely you would have to accept that there's a certain trend. Cosatu called it never-ending scandals. Was Cosatu wrong to use that phrase?
Well, if you refer to what is there are a number of issues which are really seriously challenging. The issue of Nkandla, I think we've learned a lot of lessons from it. There were a number of mistakes in that program, and we need to be able to correct all of that, because if we don't deal with it, there's obviously going to be a similar situation in the future. The issue of supervision, the issue of price hiking, the issue of a policy that has not put a budget limit, all of those issues are very serious. But also, when we have to deal with it in the context of what we have learned, I think it's been a very difficult one, and we have to accept that. But it's something that we have to take lessons and move on.
But there was also another issue along with these things about price escalation. There was a breach of the Constitution. That you haven't dealt with.
No, the issue of the breach of the Constitution is about the ruling of the Constitutional Court.
Yes.
Now, the Constitutional Court ruling dealt with the issue of the powers of the public protector, which was an important issue, and ensured that there's no confusion about it, arising from the fact that there was a Western Cape judgment that had a different view. And in the context thereof, they also raised the issue that where the president had acted inconsistently, it had been because of advice, and it was done in good faith, and that was on the ruling itself. And so those issues are issues that we've had to deal with. They've gone through the parliament. We don't agree, all of us, on what should have been done. Some people wanted the president removed, and we didn't think that would have been helpful. But at the end of the day, again, in the issue which was a concern, there was that there's a section 89, which is about the removal of the president, where the court did not rule as far as. And therefore, we believe that the issue had to be managed as a political issue, which is how we had to handle it.
It's harder to represent the ANC now than it used to be, eh?
Well, I can say that it will be hard to represent any party. The South African politics is maturing. There's lots of challenges, and it's going to be difficult increasingly. You know, South African politics is different. ANC gets 62%. If you go to Europe, the situation is very different. It's 30s, 40s, and that's because with the maturing of democracy, it becomes harder and harder to deal with all constituencies, but that should be a normal thing.
No, it's a fair comment. Should we move on to something easy like the economy?
I thought you were going to say I must now go.
No. We still have you for a little while.
You spoke about the National Development Plan. You said it's being implemented. What evidence is there that the National Development Plan is being implemented?
Well, let's start with the first issue, the infrastructure. That's one of the very strong issues that has been focused on, and a huge amount of expenditure has gone in. Part of the Moody's rating and the Standard and all the other ratings has been about the fact that they're seeing that there's a unblocking of obstacles and that infrastructure remains a positive thing. There was an issue that was raised around the area of how do you work together to create growth, which was about creating a social compact and building confidence. A lot of discussion is going on right now between government and private sector, and that is really about how to deal with all of those issues. And it's about talking about issues of labor reform, about how to limit the violence around strikes and so on. That is going on. There is work that's being done in what they call the Operation Pagisa. It's taken up a number of sectors and pulled together government and private sector in what they call laboratories to pull work together. There's reports which have been done by McKinsey that has actually taken out of the NDP and picked up a number of top 5 sectors which can be built upon to achieve 3 million job opportunities in the next 15, 20 years. All of that is being integrated in the program of recovering the economy in the 9-point plan.
Okay, but the Deputy President and the Finance Minister were speaking earlier this week, and both of them identified the ANC's failures in implementation as a major hurdle to economic growth. So there is some acceptance or acknowledgement even within the ANC that this is a problem.
I think the issue is a matter of degrees. Is it being implemented? Yes. Is it being implemented to the extent that we would like it to be? I think a lot more work can still be done.
It's obvious, I mean, what investors want is stability. South African investors, whether they're investing their money here, overseas investors. Are you confident there'll be no more shocks in the next year or two?
Well, as you say, shocks are unexpected. So,
so you were caught off guard then?
No. There's nothing in my mind that makes me feel that we should be having any reason to be shocked or even instability. But sometimes things burst out. We have seen some terrible things that have happened. They were not planned and they were not anticipated.
Apparently it's called 9/12, this terrible thing that happened.
Well, you must admit that whilst that might have been shocking, nobody really expected or could anticipate the level of the reaction from the market, but it was corrected within a short space of time.
No, but that's the point about economics and politics and the relationship between the two, is that one dovetails with the other. You're supposed to anticipate the impact of making a major cabinet change like that.
Yes, if you didn't anticipate it accurately, then you correct it as soon as you find out.
But then once you correct it, you don't keep saying that I still preferred the other guy.
No, well, look, let me not even go into that because it's a matter of how the matter got reported. You see, no, that is how the matter was reported. The point of the matter is that we've got a minister who's been appointed, and he's still there as we speak today. But he comes from the same party, so I think that we need to give him, a bit more support and not continue to create a kind of schism, because the budget that the minister presented, he had the support from the ANC, from the president, or from his cabinet. And without it, you can't implement it. And so that is the role that we have to play to ensure that there's stability around everybody. There are some things that come up and that are a bit of an irritation when we have to deal with the issues of SARS and the Hawks. It becomes an irritation because these are intra-governmental rivalries that must be managed backstage. We shouldn't be seeing all of that. So it becomes an irritation. But it's not because somebody is sitting there and there's a plan to cause all these kind of problems. So we need to manage those things better. But at the end of the day, I think people were shocked when they saw the picture of the president and the finance minister together, as though these people don't meet. But every Wednesday, they're sitting together in cabinet. So the point about it is that, sometimes it's good to slant issues in a particular way, but as we speak here, no one is under any illusion that it's a sensitive relationship that we have to build on creating political stability, on creating a closer cooperation between government and the private sector and the labor. So that is a formula that we have been able to work on, and we need to move on with it.
So this irritation you talk about, are you not able to say to your comrade Nathi Nhleko, please stop irritating the finance minister?
It's a bit difficult to be ANC. If you go in and start getting into that, you'll be the first one to say the ANC is interfering. When you stay far, you say, why is the ANC staying far? It's a catch-22 situation. But the point about it is that we all have made the point, it's not helping anybody in South Africa to have this kind of squabble that seems to be ongoing. Yes, there can be investigations, fine, but why should we get involved in all of that? Why should it end up affecting anybody? So the point at the end of the day is that we have a role to play, but we can't be seen to be going and stepping inside the government and starting to manipulate things inside government. You'll be the first one to criticize us.
Dr. Mkhize, I'll put some cards on the table here. You're someone I respect immensely. I mean, we don't know each other that well necessarily, but you're someone who I've followed for a long time, and I have great respect for you and what you do and what you've done. And something that I think has shifted since December is that almost all of us feel quite depressed about the future of the country in the way that we didn't in November. We feel poorer, and there's evidence as to why we feel poorer, because we are poorer. Now, a little bit of that is the drought, but only a small part of it. I think what's happened, and it's a middle-class audience with us today. I mean, let's just put our cards on the table there. But I think we feel, with the sources of information that we have, that life for us is about to get tougher, that we're led by someone who, I mean, I can't ask my son to emulate our president, okay? I feel that there's a crisis of leadership. There's really very few people who I can look to and think, that person is going to help make this country better. Why are you optimistic about the future of the country?
Well, I think let's start with the fact that the reason why South Africans will feel unhappy, depressed, is because the economic situation is not good. The growth that we are going through, none of us anticipated we'll ever get to. But if you look at the 1 or less than 1% growth, it visited Europe for quite a while. So this is something that will happen in different economies at different times. We're affected by a lot of other issues, commodity prices, the position of the trade of our neighbors, of our trading partners. There was a while, for a few years, in the past 3 years, where in Europe you won't get more than 1%. It is something that will happen in different countries because of the cycles of the economy. So with that, we need to be able to say, of the things that we can solve, let's try and solve. Of the things that we cannot solve, we need to see how we can adjust. So in the case, for example, I mean, I always recall the case of Greece, where there were marches all over. They actually ended up with elections 3 times. Because sometimes when this economy is like that, people think that that government or that particular prime minister or president is the problem. You know, a lot of issues need to be corrected, not just about the individual. It's got to be about what is it that we can do. And I think that South African business and government have not really worked very closely together. That affected a lot of confidence, and that needs to be built, and that's what we're busy with, and that is what I think will be very helpful to give the confidence, bring the confidence back. So when you're asking why should we be a bit more optimistic, most of the rating agencies have actually said, and economists globally, they felt that South Africa is probably at the bottom of the trough, and they think the prospect of recovery is much better. And therefore, we need to emphasize on the institutions that we've got, their resilience, all the issues of financial institutions, our judiciary, and all the issues of maintenance of law and order. All those issues are very, very important. And then we come back. Right now, there's a lot of discussion about how do we sort out the issues in mining. The issues of MPRDA that's outstanding, the once empowered, always empowered issues are on the table, are being discussed. The issues that caused the reduction in the growth in 2014, a prolonged strike in the platinum sector, you know, you have evidence now that over the past 2 years, there's not been a strike as long as that. And there's a discussion on the table, how can we ensure labor harmony and ensure that in the course of all of this, we can, you know, ensure there's early mediation and early arbitration so that there's a very limited period by which you can have an uncertainty during a strike period. So a lot of these issues for me are quite important. But at the end of the day, the resilience of the South African economy and its diversity is a very strong source of strength, because a lot of investors still look up to South Africa as a very important source or a very important destination for investment, particularly as you want to extend into the rest of the continent. And so with all of that, we still have a position which I think we need to hold together, and we need to be a little bit more positive about what we can do, especially selling South Africa in a more positive light as we go out. And this is happening better now with government and private sector working together.
So even if we want to be positive, there are things that happened that dishearten people. I'll give you an example. So we hear about these allegations of state capture, and we hear that the ANC is taking this matter seriously. It wants to stop it happening. It's undertaking an investigation. It's asking people to bring evidence. And then suddenly it closes it down. It doesn't even get access, it doesn't try and access documents that would give them evidence of how this particular family is threatening national security. You close it down. Why did you do that?
There was just a practical problem. We had a number of discussions with a number of the comrades that had raised various issues. And in the context of them discussing with us, they were not just raising this issue, they were raising a whole manner of issues, which meant it was a very general kind of discussion that we had. And we then asked them to say, look, if we have to deal with this, we need to then ask each and everyone to do it in writing so you can submit your own concerns on the matter. If that has not been forthcoming as the situation has been, then we said, okay, until we get people coming with stuff in writing, will not be able to move on with that investigation. That's what the issue is. In reality, the ANC takes the allegations seriously, but as far as we would be concerned, we would resist any form of trying to capture the ANC. And in this case, where there are individuals involved, we have to follow those issues up and see what is it that we can do to deal with it. But there's the concern about capture, it involves a lot more than just the Guptas. You hear all sorts of people raising different issues. It's something that we need to always watch out and deal with as soon as we are able to have adequate information about. In the case of the process that the Secretary General had reported, if we did not get the written statements, it is not then possible to move on with it. But if people come with the statements later, then it's fine. Now you say we should have gone and collected information. They actually referred to the statements that they'd done to various authorities, like the ministers or the department and so on. But they were not just relating to one issue. There were a whole manner of issues which belong to state institutions. And some of them, as you have heard, they said that some of them were classified reports that had to be dealt with within those particular sectors. So there's no way we can go and collect documents from government. But we needed people to come forward and say, here's the information that we want to table. And because it didn't happen, we said, okay, let's move on with the elections. But if somebody comes together and says, okay, here are all of these statements, the ANC will have to act on it.
I hear you on that, Dr. Mkhize, but it's what you are not a prosecutorial authority, so you can't, I don't think anybody expects you to make arrests or take action against these people. You need to be empowered to be able to say to the Guptas or to whoever else, stop interfering in state affairs, stop interfering in ANC processes, and you need to say to whoever in the state and the ANC is enabling them to stop it based on the information you have. So did you not have sufficient information to do that?
No, we've already spoken to them. Because
but they don't listen.
No, well, let me first deal with this. We have already spoken to them because there was a point when we wanted to know what is it that they are doing. And we then had to raise the issues of all this concern about the water kloof lending and all of those issues. you get whatever explanation that you've got. But the point as far as we're concerned is that those issues have been confronted. The issues that have not been dealt with are, we raise the issues of generically of people who claim that they did this and they did that. But if you are dealing with a situation where you're asking the question, it becomes he says, he says, she said, I said, and that becomes a problem. But what we're now moving on was a situation where we're saying we now have statements. We did not get the statements. And that's what we're really making a distinction. It's not like we have not, we've actually had a meeting where we called them and we asked them all about all of these issues.
Okay, we've run out of time. I have one question I'm dying to ask you.
Oh.
In 2012, you were apparently the person who was able to negotiate with one Cyril Ramaphosa to draw him back into active politics. Do you still support him for whatever position he might be competing in next year?
And I should have thought that you would come with those kinds of questions. One issue I'm not getting into is 2017 succession. Who do you support, who do you not support? We've got our leaders, we support our leaders. The processes are going on. At the right time, we'll go to conference. The ANC members will elect their leaders, and we will support whoever gets elected. But to pick and choose today, it's a very inappropriate answer to give you.
So you won't tell us if there was a deal that you come here, you be on our ticket now, and in the next one we're going to support you. There was
there's no such a discussion. No, I can't even respond to that.
Okay.
Internal discussions and informal discussions, private confidential discussions remain so.
No, I'm only asking you this because, you know, we heard stories about, you know, that he's now been dumped, there are other preferences, so we just thought we'd clarify the matter.
No, the conference is coming. We'll talk about it at the right time, so let's leave it.
That's a deal. We hope that you'll be here with us next year when we have the gathering, because that will definitely be on the agenda.
It will be easier for you if you get a membership card, then you'll be inside and you'll know what's happening.
Dr. Zweli Mkhize, I think you'll probably agree when I say this is a tough crowd. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. I expected it, though.
We hand you back to John now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Who's moderating the next one?
Huh? It's CP and Garrett.